so I can then use it from here. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة الباقية على أعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد, sisters and brothers in Iman, Assalamu alaikum. We are starting the first semester, if we may call it, for this year's weekly program, which inshallah will go on to about 10 to 12 weeks till the month of Sha'ban. We might be missing 1 or 2 weeks in between because of the special occasions that we will have in the Islamic calendar. And for these weekly sessions, the topic is ethics and morality, basically dealing with the issue of akhlaq. The text that we have selected as the basis of our lectures and discussion is Hadith, which means 40 hadiths by the late Grand Ayatollah Imam Khomeini rahmatullah alayh. It is one of his famous books in which he basically has this discussion of hadiths of the Prophet and the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, dealing mostly, although the hadiths are of different on different issues, but most of the hadiths deal with akhlaq, spirituality, and ethics and morality. And the good thing is that we have this book in English language, even in Urdu. As far as the English version is concerned, it is available online. If you go to the famous Shia website known as Al-Islam, al-islam.org, on there you will get the entire English translation of the 40 hadiths. And basically what we'll be doing is that, for each session, I'll be selecting a topic from Hadith, from 40 hadiths. You will be informed via email, and make sure we have your email in the list. You will be given the topic that you will be selecting, so you can go and do your own reading of that text before you come here. Of course, we are not going to go through the entire discussion on all topics from the book. Instead, we'll just be summarizing the main issues and using that text as a guideline for discussions on those specific subjects and themes. But for, today, before I go to the first hadith, as an introduction to this whole process, let me talk about the concept of 40 hadiths. Why Hadith? Why Arba'una Hadithan? This concept, actually, there is an existing ongoing tradition among Muslim scholars to compile 40 hadiths and to memorize them and to write its commentary. Now, why 40? This comes from the famous hadith of the Prophet, where he says, "Man hafidha min ummati arba'ina hadithan ba'atha Allahu yawm al-qiyamah aliman faqihan." That whoever from my ummah memorizes 40 hadiths, Allah will raise him on the day of Qiyamah as a scholar and a faqih, a scholar of jurisprudence. And this is such a universally accepted hadith that many ulama actually have tried to live up to that hadith. And this tradition, when we look at it, this hadith is very famous, especially the first part of it, where the Prophet says that whoever memorizes 40 hadiths from me, the latter part of the hadith, there are so many different versions of it, all positive of course, but the ending is different. For example, in some it says, من حفظ من أمتي 40 حديثا مما يحتاجون إليه من أمر دينهم بعثه الله يوم القيامة عالما فقيها. For example, whoever memorizes 40 ahadith from the ahadith which are relevant and according to the needs of the people in their religion, then this will happen to this person. Or another hadith says, whoever memorizes 40 ahadith, kuntu lahu shafi'an yawm al-qiyamah. The Prophet says, I will be his shafi'an intercessor on the day of Qiyamah. And so when we look at this hadith, there are different versions of it, but the main theme is prevailing in all versions, where the Prophet has emphasized that to memorize 70 ahadith. Now let us look at this concept of hafiza. What does it mean? Memorizing. When the Prophet says, whoever memorizes, what is he actually intending to say? Allama Majlisi has discussed this issue, and he says, hafiza, memorizing has three meanings. One is memorizing, one is preserving something by memorizing or written form or by narrating it to others. And the third is that narrating the hadith the way muhaddiseen, the scholars of hadith do. They sit down and narrate the hadith to one another. And then he goes on to say that even this concept of hifz of hadith, there are different levels of it. And even the sawab depends on the levels. There might be a person who just memorizes 40 hadiths. He will get sawab for it. There would be somebody else who not only memorizes it, but even contemplates on it, thinks about it, studies it. The sawab will be even more. Then there will be a third person who not only memorizes the ahadith, studies the ahadith, but lives by those ahadith of Rasulullah. Then that person is on a higher level and the sawab will be even more. Another scholar by the name of Agha Buzurg Tehrani, who died in early 70s, he says actually the concept of حفظ من حفظ من أمتي 40 حديثا, the way it has come out in the ummah is that people basically make sure that they write it down. So he emphasizes on writing the 40 ahadith with commentary or without commentary. Now Agha Buzurg Tehrani is one of those scholars who was expert in bibliography. In a sense, he knew his knowledge was about books themselves. He has a book called Az-Zari'a ila Tasanif al-Shia, which is an encyclopedia of Shia books. It just gives you, in alphabetical order, the list of the books written by the Shia scholars. It's in more than 20 volumes. So if you want to know about any book, that the ulama had written, you look at if you know the name of for example, you're looking for Arba'in Hadith, for example, then you go under Alif. Now, Agha Buzurg Tehrani, in the first volume, because that's the Alif volume, he actually has listed more than 75 titles by Shia ulama, where the title of the book is Arba'una Hadithan. This shows that, among Shia ulama, this has been very common. Many of them, have lived up to this hadith of Rasulullah, of compiling the 40 ahadith, writing commentaries on them, and the style used by the scholars, they vary. Some of the scholars would just compile 40 ahadith of different subjects, whatever they liked. Some will concentrate on one subject and then gather 40 ahadith on that specific subject. Maybe it's fiqh, or maybe it's about aqidah, or maybe it's about history, or the fadail of Amir al-Mu'mineen, or akhlaq. And it's in the same light that we see this Chahal hadith of Imam Khomeini. He basically focused more on akhlaq, on moral and ethical issues. And basically, if you look at the preface of his book, he says, I, as a humble servant of God, was contemplating for some time to select 40 hadiths from among the hadiths of the Ahlul Bayt of the Prophet, from authentic books of our ashab and scholars, and was trying to compile them with an appropriate explanation of each hadith that can be applied to the general conditions of the people. Because his intention was to write for the people, unlike the majority of ulama who have written the book Arba'una Hadithan in Arabic language, Imam Khomeini chose to write it in Farsi, so that the Farsi speaking people would be able to gain benefit from it. And therefore even the title is in Farsi, Chahal Hadith, which means 40 hadiths. Now, when the ulama were basically working on this issue of writing the books of hadith, there was a tradition that before you narrate a hadith, you narrate the chain of narration. Now, during the early days, when the books were not that easily available, this was very important. If somebody comes to you and says, this is what Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam said, or this is what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, it was important for that person to come up with this sanad and say, where did he hear it from? And so it was very customary during early days of Shia history, especially after Ghaybat-e-Sughra. We see that many ulama and the scholars of hadith, their disciples would hear from them, write it down, and read it back to them. And then at the end they will ask them that, can you give me an ijazah for riwayat? Ijazah, the community only knows about ijazah of khums. They don't know anything about else. But in the academic or scholarly world, there is an ijazah of riwayat, where the teacher or the sheikh hadith gives a ijazah to the disciple and the student to say that I authorize you to basically link yourself to me, and through me the people who are behind me in the earlier generation to the imams. And during early days this was very important. But then gradually the books were compiled, like Usul-e-Kafi by Sheikh Khomeini, and Sheikh Saduq then came with Man La Yahdhur al-Faqih. Then Sheikh Tusi came later on with Istabsar and other books. Basically, then those books with the sanad right in the book was sufficient. There was no need for people to get ijazah of riwayat. But for the sake of barakat and for the sake of continuing that chain from one generation to another, even now there are ulama who actually ask for ijazah of riwayat from the experts of hadith of the time, so that they can have this blessing of being linked to the ulama one generation after another, going back to the a'imma, and from the a'imma to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam himself. And so keeping that tradition alive, Imam Khomeini also, in the first hadith that he writes in this book, he has given a lengthy sanad, where he says, I am narrating on the authority of my sheikh, who narrated on the authority of his sheikh, and he gives the name, one after another, going through the 12 or 13 centuries, all the way to Sheikh Khomeini, and from Sheikh Khomeini, the specific hadith that he selects, then he have narrators there, going all the way to the Imam. And, unfortunately, the English translation of Chahal Hadith, which is available, as I said, online also, doesn't have that first part of the sanad. Probably the translator thought this is, just for barakat, so it's not required, and I understand that. But, I have decided to present that to you, although it's just a symbolic chain of narration, going from Imam Khomeini to his sheikhs, and going all the way to the Imam, just to make you familiar with this concept of continuity in our scholarly world. That our ulama and the maraji, on the scholarly level are linked one after another, one generation to another, all the way back to the time of the Imams. So if you look at this sanad of, that Ayatollah Khomeini has mentioned in his Jihad Hadith, I'll just give you very quickly, I don't know how many names you can read there. We'll start with, Ayatollah Khomeini referring from Muhammad Riza Isfahani, who is narrating from Muhaddis Nuri, Hussein Nuri. Then again he has another ijaza of riwayat from Sheikh Abbas Qummi, the one who compiled Mafatihul Jinan. And he has ijaza from his student, Muhaddis Nuri, again the same person as at the end of the first line. Then you come to Ayatollah Khomeini had another third ijaza from Sayyid Muhsin Amili, who had another ijaza from Sayyid Muhammad Rizvi al-Hindi. And then the fourth ijaza that Ayatollah Khomeini had was from Abul Qasim Dehkurdi, who had another ijaza from somebody called Mirza Hashim Isfahani. And so these are the four ijazas that Imam Khomeini mentions in his Jihad Hadith. And then he says that there are many other ijazas of riwayat, but I'm just leaving it to these four. Now all four of them, you'll see at the end you have three names: Hussein Nuri in line 1, Hussein Nuri in line 2, Sayyid Rizvi Hindi in line 3, and Mirza Hashim Isfahani line 4. So there are three individuals there. Now all those three, they are connected to Sheikh Murtaza Ansari. Their ijaza, all three of them, individuals there, connected to Murtaza Ansari. And Sheikh Murtaza Ansari is connected to Ahmad al-Naraqi, a very famous scholar of akhlaq. Jami al-Sa'adat is his very well-known book. And Ahmad Naraqi has an ijaza of riwayat from Sayyid Muhammad Bahr al-Ulum, who has the ijaza of riwayat from Muhammad Baqir Bahbahani, who has an ijaza from his father, Muhammad Akmal Bahbahani, who has an ijaza from Muhammad Baqir Majlisi. Allama Majlisi, you hear the name there? Now these are all connected to one another. Wherever you see italics, that's the father who has given the ijaza to his son. Then Muhammad Baqir Majlisi has the ijaza of riwayat from Muhammad Taqi Majlisi, and he has an ijaza of riwayat from Sheikh Bahai, and Sheikh Bahai has the ijaza of riwayat from his father Hussein Abdul Samad, who has the ijaza from Shahid Thani, who has ijaza from Muhaqqiq Karaki, and then Shamsuddin Al-Jazini, who has the ijaza from Ziyauddin Al-Makki, and he has from his father Shahid Awwal, and Shahid Awwal has the ijaza from Fakhr al-Muhaqqiqeen, who is the son of Allama Hilli, and he has the ijaza from Allama Hilli. So now we are already close to the 7th century of the Islamic era. Allama Hilli has an ijaza from his uncle, from his mother's side, his mamu, Muhaqqiq Hilli, and he has the ijaza from Sayyid Abu Ali al-Fakhar, and Fakhar basically has the ijaza from Shahzan al-Qummi. Shahzan al-Qummi has the ijaza from Muhammad Abul Qasim al-Tabari. Those of you in Toronto who have been getting this book called Basharatul Mustafa li-Shi'ati Murtaza, that's the author of it. And then you have Abu Ali al-Hussein, who has given ijaza to al-Tabari. And Ali Abu Hussein is the son of Sheikh Tusi, and he has the ijaza from his father, Sheikh Tusi, and Sheikh Tusi has ijaza from Sheikh Mufid, and Sheikh Mufid has ijaza from Sheikh Saduq, and Sheikh Saduq has ijaza from Abul Qasim Ja'far bin Qawlaway, and he has, Ibn Qawlaway has ijaza from Sheikh Kulaini, the compiler of Al-Kafi. So this is the connection going from Imam Khomeini all the way to Sheikh Kulaini. Now you look at the first hadith that we'll be discussing tonight. Sheikh Kulaini then quotes from Ali ibn Ibrahim, and he has the ijaza from him, and that's connected to his father Ibrahim bin Hashim, and then who has narrated this from an-Nawfali. An-Nawfali has narrated from As-Sukuni. As-Sukuni has narrated this first hadith that we will be discussing from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. Just to, I'm not really in the habit of it, but I thought maybe this time I'll make an exception to it. You look at the first name, Muhaddis Noori, Sheikh Hussein Noori, who is the teacher of Sheikh Abbas Qummi. And Sheikh Abbas Qummi gave the ijazah to Imam Khomeini. Now, Muhaddis Noori had a student, a very famous student, besides Sheikh Abbas Qummi, had a student by the name of Agha Buzurg Tehrani. I had mentioned him earlier, who was expert on Shia bibliography. And Agha Buzurg Tehrani had given an ijazah to an alim who passed away about 10 years ago by the name of, he was a very great scholar in Qom by the name of Abdul Aziz al-Tabatabai. And that's the ijazah of Agha Buzurg Tehrani given to marhum Sayyid Abdul Aziz Tabatabai. And Sayyid Abdul Aziz Tabatabai had given the riwayat, the ijazah of riwayat to me, which is on this page. And so I can also, in a way connect myself to our great ulama, going all the way back to the Ahlul Bayt, and from the Ahlul Bayt to the Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam himself. As I said, this is not really an academic issue, but I thought it's important to understand that, when we talk about, the scholarly world in the Shia Islam, there's a lot of continuity which is there across the centuries from the time of Ghaibat to the present time. Anyway, now let us go into the actual book itself. The first hadith that Imam Khomeini has selected has to do with the issue of Jihad an-Nafs. And this is basically the fundamental issue as far as akhlaq is concerned. And that is, the struggle with yourself. And the hadith that he basically has quoted here is a hadith where the sixth Imam says that in the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ba'atha sariyatan, that the Prophet has sent an army contingent for jihad. And let me just write the whole thing here. And when they came back to Medina, the Prophet basically met them, and he says to them, Marhaban biqawmin qadul jihad al-asghar. Welcome to the people who have performed the minor jihad. وَبَقِيَ عَلَيْهِمَ الْجِهَادُ الْأَكْبَرُ, but have yet to fulfill the major jihad. So the people were surprised. They thought maybe he's talking about a bigger military campaign. And so they asked, فَقِيلَ Ya Rasulullah, mal jihadul akbar. O the Messenger of Allah, what is the jihad akbar that you have mentioned? And that's where the Prophet says, Jihad an-Nafs. The struggle against the self. And so this is the basis of this concept that we have in Islam of Jihad akbar and Jihad asghar. So these are not even terms invented by the ulama or Muslims. These are the terms actually given to us by the Prophet Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam himself. Now this hadith is not only by this chain of narrations that you see. There is also another chain of narrator for that. You go all the way in that to Amir al-Mu'minin himself, who has used exactly the same words. And that's where we see the similarity and continuity in the channel of our sources going back to the Prophet from the Imams. Now, there's a lot to discuss, and I would urge you to go and look at it, the first section of the book. It's not that easy reading, but you don't have to go through everything in there. What we have done is we have summarized some major and important points from that discussion about Jihad an-Nafs. Number one, what is Nafs? There are a lot of discussion about it. What is Nafs? And people, have pages after pages of discussion in different books of akhlaq that you see. And I would just summarize it by one word: I, or me. That's nafs. You know, for example, if you see, if a person is caught 50 years after he has committed a crime, and the evidence is there, and if that person is brought to the court, you know, can he say that, well, you know, 50 years ago, you know, my whole system has already gone through so many changes. You know, every 7 years we are told our cells basically are all new. So, you know, why are you punishing me? I had done, you know, this happened 50 years ago in a body which was very different from the body that I have now. You think that person will get away from the punishment? No. Because we are holding that person responsible, not the body. And that's where when we talk about nafs, you know, that reality or the phenomenon that I can point to and see, it's me and I. That is the meaning of nafs that we are talking about. And from the you know, Islamic perspective, what we are told is that, you know, a human being consists of two you know, dimensions. One is known as the body and the other is known as the soul. And both are, of course, very important. If you have a body without the soul, it's dead. People will bury it. They have to dispose it very quickly. You know, and if you just have a soul without a body, you cannot really function as such. And so when we are talking about a human being is complete when the body and the soul is together. But there is difference in the nature of the body and the soul. When you look at the body, that is the physical life of a human being, whereas the soul has the inner life. When you look at the body, this is the apparent dimension of our existence, whereas the soul is the hidden dimension. If you look at the body, this is the earthly, you know, khaki dimension of our wujud, whereas the soul is not from the earth, it is heavenly and divine in nature. And that is why you'll see when Adam was created, you know, he was made from the turab. The body was made from the turab. But the ruh came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the ruh is a heavenly, malakuti phenomenon. It is not earthly or khaqi, you know, reality. So that's the big difference between the two. Now when we talk about jihad an-Nafs, basically there is constant struggle between these two dimensions of our being. The soul on one side and the body on the other side. They are not always synchronized with this purpose and their actions. Basically, where is this jihad an-Nafs taking place? What is the area where this battle is going on? It is our body. Number one. Who are the soldiers fighting this battle? You know, that's our bodily organs. So the fight is within, and the fighters are also various parts of our body. According to Imam Khomeini, he has used an expression where he says, Al-Aqalim al-Sab'a, the 7 worlds within us. And he refers to the eyes, the ears, the tongue, the hands, the feet, the belly, and the private parts. I don't think anything is left out of what a human being can do. Whatever we do is covered by these 7 you know, sets of organs that God has given to us. So we have the battleground of jihad nafs is the body, and these are the foot soldiers. And who is in commander-in-chief of that? Of this problem? That is me and you. It is you, yourself, your nafs, whatever you would like to call it. So you are basically managing this whole struggle. And then to continue that, what happens? Who is the victor at the end? And that is where the actual concept of jihad an-Nafs comes in. You know, whoever controls the nafs is the victor. And there are 2 powers controlling the nafs of a human being. If the mind or the nafs is controlled by shaitani forces, then that person is going in a downward trend, going towards Jahannam. And if, and then the organs, the foot soldiers become the army of shaitan. But if the mind and the nafs is controlled by Rahmani forces, then, they are moving in a upwards direction, going towards the na'im and the paradise. And so in that state, the organs will become the army of Rahman. So you have the army of shaitan and the army of Rahman. And that depends on what is our state at that time. If our nafs is being controlled by shaitani forces, then our limbs become the army of shaitan. If our nafs is being controlled by the army Rahmani forces, then our body becomes the army of Rahman, the Almighty God. And so this is the concept that we see also explained by Imam Khomeini in this issue. And that is where I would like to connect that with this, many times we say, the nafs is of three types. There are not three different nafs within us. It is one nafs, but the condition of the nafs depends. That's where you use this one or two or the third labels for it. Many times we say, we have three nafs. No, we don't have three nafs. It is one nafs. It is the condition of the nafs where you will use the terms. For example, when you control the shaitani forces, then your nafs is nafs ammara. Ammara basically, it is encouraging you to do bad things. But, if you control the Rahmani forces, then your nafs is known as nafs lawama. So they are not two different nafs. It's single nafs. If it is under the control of the shaitani forces, then we will describe it as nafs ammara. It is this me who is actually now using my body to do bad deeds. But if my nafs is being controlled by Rahmani forces, then my nafs become nafs lawama. It means it basically is constantly blaming me whenever I am trying to do something bad. So it's always, putting me in the right track whenever I deviate from Salat al-Mustaqim. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also, when He talks about nafs ammara, this is in Surah Yusuf, 53, and when He talks about nafs lawama, this is in Surah Qiyamah, which is Surah number 75, ayah 2. Now, when we talk about the struggle of the self, it is known as Jihad Akbar. Why is it known as Akbar? And why is the armed struggle known as Asghar? There must be a reason for it. Imam Khomeini has not discussed it, but this is discussed more by Sheikh Ibrahim Amini in a very good book. I think it's also available in English translation, Self-Building. That's again about akhlaq and tazkiyah nafs. And basically there are three reasons why Jihad an-Nafs is known as Akbar. Number one, the armed struggle is limited by time, place and circumstances. Has any one of us ever been in a situation where Jihad Asghar has become wajib on us? At least not in our lifetime. We don't even know anything about it. So it is limited. The scope of Jihad Asghar is limited, but when it comes to Jihad Akbar, it is actually a lifetime struggle. Everyone goes through it. Everywhere we have to go through it. And so there is no limitation of time, place and circumstances at all. The second difference is that, good deeds depend on willpower. And willpower depends on having this control on the nafs. So even when you do good deeds, it all depends on what is the state of Jihad Akbar that you are going through. And finally, when you look at the good deeds that you are doing, it only is accepted by Allah if it is done with ikhlas and sincerity. And again, sincerity is something which you can only acquire if you are basically going through this process of Jihad Akbar, and you are a mujahid on that level. I'll just give you one example. You can have Khalid bin Walid. I don't know how many of you know about him. He's a hero of our Muslim brothers. You look at his example, and they call him Saifullah. This is a title given to him later on. And then you look at, there's no comparison at all, but I'm just for the sake of giving an example, you look at the example of Amir al-Mu'minin Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. Khalid bin Walid used sword. Amir al-Mu'minin used sword. Apparently the deed, on the level of deeds, is the same. But if you look at the level of intention, there is a difference between the heavens and the earth. Because you have example of Khalid bin Walid during the days of the first Khalifa. He goes somewhere, there was some groups who were denying to give zakat. Many of them were, labeled to be murtad. Some of them were denying to give zakat, not because they had become murtad and rejected Islam, but they actually were questioning the Khilafat, whether you are authorized to get zakat or not. So Khalid bin Walid, as a commander of that army, was sent by the first Khalifa. They ended up at the tribe of Malik bin Nuwaira, and who was saying, we are Muslims, we are not become murtad. We are just not sure whether we should give zakat to this individual or not. And his wife was standing beside him, and he looked at her. And historians say that she was one of the most beautiful women of Arabia at that time. And Khalid bin Walid insisted to the chief of that tribe, Malik bin Nuwaira, that no, you are murtad and I'm going to kill you. And that is where Malik bin Nuwaira says to him, you are not killing me because I'm a murtad, you are killing me because of my wife. He turns to his wife and says, you are the one who has caused my death. And he kills him, and then he takes that lady with him that same night. So, that level where there is, using sword just by itself doesn't mean anything. There is murder there is adultery there, And so when you look at deed by itself, they don't mean anything unless a person is on the level of Jihad Akbar. These people who go there on Fridays in Muslim cities, inside the mosque, at the Namaz al-Jummah time, and explode bombs. You think they are doing jihad? They think they are doing jihad. But they are utter failure when it comes to Jihad Akbar. So the reason why this spiritual struggle is known as Akbar, because even your minor struggle, the armed struggle, the validity of that, the acceptance of that in the eyes of Allah depends on your level of Jihad Akbar. So these people going around doing such things, they are not mujahid. They are not doing jihad. They are actually absolute failure as far as Jihad an-Nafs and Jihad Akbar is concerned. As opposed to the example that we have of Amir al-Mu'minin, in the event of Khandaq, he was able to throw Amr ibn Abdul down on the ground, and he sits on him to finish him off, and that fellow spat on the blessed face of Amir al-Mu'minin. Imam for a moment became very angry, and therefore he got up, moved away until he calmed himself down. Then he goes and finishes his job. That is example of Jihad Akbar taking precedence over Jihad Asghar. Amir al-Mu'minin didn't want his anger to be part of his motivation in killing Amr ibn Abdul. Only when he had calmed down, then he goes back and finishes his job by killing Amr ibn Abdul. And so this is where we have to realize that the Muslim world really is very much messed up and confused, because they do not know that this is a struggle which is wajib on all Muslims at all the time, at all places, under all circumstances. Unlike this issue of taking up arms, because the validity of that depends on what level of Jihad Akbar you have attained. Moving on further, Imam Khomeini basically, when he talks about Jihad an-Nafs, he mentions there are about 5 to 6 basic conditions you must have in order to go through this process. And this is what we would like to discuss before we conclude tonight. Number one, basic steps for Jihad an-Nafs, the major Jihad. The first one is tafakkur. Tafakkur means contemplation, to think about issues. And what he basically is saying, that it's very important for us every day. And this is really a very important, advice from Imam Khomeini. And I would just like to, make sure, I'm not claiming to be anywhere on this level. The reason I'm doing this is firstly to educate myself, and in process, maybe get sawab by sharing that with the rest of you. The first important thing he is mentioning here is saying that every day, he says on a daily basis, set a time, even few minutes, to think about why you are here in this dunya. Maybe early in the morning, first thing you do, think about it. What am I doing here? What is the purpose of life? And that is where you'll come to realize that, okay, I've been created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has blessed me with body and power of intelligence. He has, given me the resources around in this dunya to use it for my good. He has also provided guidance in form of prophets and anbiya and, holy books and the imams that we have. And so when we see all of these things, we will come to realize that, there must be a higher purpose for my existence. Not only to eat and drink and sleep and then die one day. I am a being of a higher level and category. And so this issue of, thinking about ourselves every day, that why we are here, that will help us in understanding the purpose of life, that we have to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and try to obey as much as we can in order to gain salvation in this dunya as well as in the hereafter. The second important thing he mentions is azm. After tafakkur, azm. Azm means irada. Irada and azm, willpower and determination to do something. And when it comes to the issue of azm, he basically mentions four things. Unfortunately, I couldn't prepare the detailed slides for all of these. But under azm, he mentions four things. You should build up this willpower. Number one, to purify yourself from sins. So refrain from guna. Number two, to perform the wajibat. And number three, to compensate for whatever losses in your deeds have been in the past. Qaza or kafara or whatever. And number four, he says, try, and this is a very interesting term he uses, he says, try to have this determination to become insan aqli wa shar'i, to become a rational and a religious person. And he's emphasizing in both points. And then he talks about this issue of, becoming a insan shar'i, a human being who abides by the Sharia laws. He goes on to say that, there are many people who think that if you go on a spiritual path, you don't really need to do these rituals. Namaz and taharat and najasat and roza and hajj, many of them say, oh, this is only for the junior fellows of spirituality. This is, I have reached to a higher level. And so I don't have to really go through these rituals. And he calls them that these are pseudo-spiritualists. They are not real spiritualists. This is the term Imam Khomeini uses. And, just to emphasize on this point, let me summarize for you the discussion done by Sayyid Murtaza Mutahiri, where he says, when you look at Iman and Amal, there are three possibilities. Either you are Isalatul Iman, which means, or Isalatul Aqidah, which means, you just believe and that's sufficient for you. Very much like the Christians who say, you believe in Jesus, then you don't have to worry about anything, whatever you do. you still will get salvation. That is one perspective. Then you have other group who are not religious people, they are secularists, and they say they are asalatul amal, which means they believe, well, actions are more important things. It doesn't matter what you believe. As long as you do good things, good deeds, you are a good person. In Islam, basically, if you look at it, Islam combines Iman and Amal together. Almost everywhere Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whenever He talks about Iman, He talks about Amal Salih. You will see in Quran, it's always together. Alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat. It's rarely that you will see they are separated from one another. Because we consider Iman to be the root and the Amal to be the branches. If there are no branches, it means your roots are decaying. They are rotten. They need more, fertilizer and water there. Otherwise, the tree is dying. And so you need Iman and Amal together. We cannot be like some people who really consider them to be at a higher level. They say, oh, we don't have to do namaz. We are at a higher level. Sometimes they use these terms, shari'at, tariqat, and haqiqat. There are three levels of spirituality. Those who are down, they have to follow the sharia. Those who are at the middle, they are known as tariqat. Once you reach to haqiqat, then sharia doesn't apply to you anymore. And unfortunately, even in our community also, there is an ignorant way of looking at this. There are certain people who go all the way to Karbala to do the ziyarat of Imam Hussain. They will go for ziyarat. By the time of namaz, they'll just sit there and not do namaz. They say, oh, we are tired. We didn't come for namaz. We just came for ziyarat. This is where you realize that Iman and Amal has to be together. And this is the emphasis that Imam Khomeini also has when he says, you should have this azm and irada and will to become insan aqli wa shar'i. And then he says, that this issue of having a strong will power, this is actually key to success in spiritual life. He actually considers this to be a distinction of a human being. And because if you don't have a strong willpower, he says, and these are his words, very, very harsh, but sometimes we need to hear that. He says, God forbid, if you go from this world as a person of weak resolve, then you are a mindless human form who will not be raised as a human being on the day of Qiyamah. He says, if you don't have the azm, you will not be raised as a human being. And this is another perspective of Qiyamah, that what is the form in which people will be raised on the day of Qiyamah. There are some hadiths from Imams where they say some people will be such that even pigs and dogs would be much more beautiful compared to them. So we have to think about it. And Imam Khomeini puts emphasis on this issue of azm and irada, willpower and determination, as one of the crucial things of success in spiritual life. Let me give you just one example from one of the ulama by the name of Ayatollah Hujjat, who died in early 60s. Ayatollah Hujjat was in Qom. There is actually a madrasa hostel he built. A very big madrasa in Qom is known as Madrasa Hujjatiyya. There was somebody who was interviewed in Jafri News, and he was saying Madrasa Hujjatiyya is where the students go to become Hujjatul Islam. Well, no, it's nothing to do with becoming Hujjatul Islam. The madrasa is known as Hujjatiyya because it was built by Ayatollah Hujjat. So it's dedicated to him with his name. And he was a chain smoker. Now this is, late 80s, early 60s, where the world didn't know much about the harm of smoking. So then he had problems with, respiratory disease and breathing. He was admitted in the hospital in Tehran, and one of the experts came to see him and he said, you really have to refrain from smoking. And Ayatollah Hujjat said, but what is the fun in living longer if I cannot smoke? So the doctor, he was actually joking, and the doctor became more serious. He said, no, I'm not joking. I think this is going to be zarar for you. It is going to harm your health. He says, are you sure this is your expert opinion that this is going to be a zarar for me? He said, yes. He said, if that is the case, I quit. And just this two words, I quit. A person who was a smoker for his whole life, he has this so strong azm and irada and willpower that once he realized that this is not a good thing, he just said, I quit, and there's no issue of putting any, patches here and there to get gradually, out of this habit and urge to smoking. And so when we talk about this issue of azm and irada, we have to realize this is a very important thing. According to Imam Khomeini, he says the azm and irada becomes weak when people commit sins constantly. If the sins are committed constantly, then the irada of a person becomes very weak. And then he quotes something which is very interesting. This was written a long time ago, where he says, referring to one of the sins which robs a person of willpower, he says, Ustad Muazzam ma damazulluh می فرمودند بیشتر از هرچه گوش کردن به تغنیات سلب اراده و عزم از انسان می کند. Now he doesn't give the name. He says one of our respected teachers, may his shadow continue upon us. So this teacher was alive when Imam Khomeini was writing this. Doesn't name him, but he says our teacher used to say that more than anything else, listening to the sounds of music and songs steal from men their willpower and the power of resolution. And this is, if you look at it, we have come at a time where music is around us all the time. Even to relax themselves, people think that I should be listening to music. Even some people say, well, it shouldn't be haram at that level. But we have to realize that even listening to music is kind of a khomar, intoxication, where it basically, when we talk about ghina, songs, without even musical instruments, if it reaches to a point where you start moving your neck or your feet or the toes on a subconscious level, that's where it becomes haram. Because what Islam is saying that your mind should not be intoxicated. You should be in your full sense at all the time. And this is where the issue of listening to music comes in. Those who basically say, why can't I listen to the classical music to relax myself? I said, why don't you go and read the Quran? Quran itself says, Allah bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. By remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by going to the Quran, you have this itmi'nan and peace in your heart. So we have all these things, but we are going through other methods. Very quick, 2 or 3 items more here in the list. One is musharata. After this issue of tafakkur, thinking every day, even for a few minutes, and then the issue of azm and irada, then he says musharata. Musharata means making a shart, a condition with Allah. He says, sit down in the morning on a daily basis and make an agreement with Allah that, oh Allah, today I am going to follow you and obey you and not commit sins. Now all all Muslims actually have this in their mind. But if you consciously, actively sit down and say in the morning that, oh Allah, I am making this musharata, with agreement with you, that today I am not going to commit sin, then you are basically binding yourself even more strongly. And after that he says, after musharata there is muraqaba. Muraqaba means to be on watch, vigilance, because you have made this commitment with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So first thing in the morning you do musharata, you make the agreement with Allah. Then for the whole day you do muraqaba, constantly be on watch to see shaitan doesn't come between you and this shart that you have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says, then at the end of the day, when you go to sleep, then you do muhasaba. Muhasaba means taking account of the whole day. Sit down and say, okay, how did my day go from the spiritual point of view? If you have done good things, thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it and ask for more tawfiq. If you have had lapses in between on that day, ask for forgiveness and pray that your next day be better than the day that passed. And finally, he emphasizes on the issue of tadhakkur, which means always to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as much as we can. Our namaz are there, of course, and the timings of namaz themselves are a way of reminding ourselves of the presence of Allah in our day-to-day life. Let me just conclude with the ayat from Surah Jummah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this concept, where He says, at the time of prayers, leave your business, go for prayers, for Jummah prayers. But then He says, فَإِذَا قُضِيَتِ الصَّلَاةِ, when the prayers has ended, فَانْتَشِرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, then He says, go around the world. وَابْتَغُوا مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ, seek the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has created for you. But while you're going about doing your business and worldly activities, وَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا, remember Allah quite a lot. So even in your so-called secular and worldly activities, the remembrance of Allah is an important element in our Jihad Akbar. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept this ibadat from us and give us the tawfiq to really live up to this hadith of the Prophet, where the Prophet is emphasizing on the concept of Jihad Akbar. We have a couple of minutes so if you have any quick question, otherwise we'll leave it for next week.
I just read that you said the 3 states of nafs. I heard there are 7. Is it true?
Well, you see, technically the 3 states are the one which are there in the Quran. Nafs ammara, the negative one, nafs lawwama, the positive one, and then once a person reaches to that highest level, then that person's nafs is known as nafs mutma'inna, means the soul which has reached the level of tranquility and peace. And that's where then Allah calls you back. So many people are afraid to reach to that level. But that's so those are the 3 levels. Of course, our ulama and some of the spiritual masters have even talked more about it, different levels. But I would say, going back to the Quran and the Sunnah of the Ma'asumeen, we would look at those as the main issues. Okay, salawat par nahi par.